So in keeping with the informal theme of travel stories, I have another one. This one was interesting for me to craft in my mind because it was a 2-month time, about 6 years ago in my life, which then led to different versions of different stories, each one just trying to say a different thing. And it was only recently that I started to realize that the different things were connected in some way. So I have 3 versions that I want to tell, or 3 different scenes. So just to first set the scene, it was 2009, and I had just graduated with a shiny new bachelor's degree in international development, and that luckily led to my first, what I thought was my first real adult job. That wasn't really adult enough to pay me a wage or anything, but it did exist, so that was great. And so it was essentially to do 2 months and the preparation involved in doing some qualitative research. What that meant is there was this promising program in rural Ghana where I'd have my expenses covered to go, and I would speak to people about their lives and how this program had touched them, and then report back to someone. And I never really figured that part out because I guess it was above my pay grade. And the bargain was that I would do about 12 months of part-time work, and in exchange I would get $3,000 and the title of Policy Fellow. Policy Fellow. And I was really excited about that. It was the adultness and the professionalness that I could sort of wrap myself in, and that felt great. So the 3 stories, the first one is kind of like a fish out of water hijinks story. The one you might tell around a dinner party or in the living room. Oh, isn't it interesting how they do things around there? And so there's one scene from this story where I was trying to make sense in my first week of something that foreigners and expats often notice in going to Accra, the capital at least, which is sort of the missionary zeal or the religious fervor of many Ghanaians. And so I would walk down the street and I'd see signs of businesses like Lord is King Auto Repair and He is Risen Hair Salon. And these would just be on and on everywhere. So one way that this kind of energy showed up in a personal interaction was in, I think, my first couple days. I was getting onto a Trotro, which is one of these minibus taxis, with my host, who I'd been staying with. His name is Isaac. And it was sort of rush hour in the evening, and as I was getting on, people are jostling to get in, and I felt kind of a pat down in my leg, and I sit down, and sure enough, my wallet was gone. So I didn't know what to do, but I told Isaac in the front, let him know what had happened, and he then shouted to the driver in Tree about what had happened, and immediately it was just like this eruption of outrage from everyone in the Trotro. And the old ladies and the young students and people coming home from the market were just shouting, and the driver, something happened, he pulled over, and immediately the person next to me opens up the sliding door and jumps out, not to run away, but to say, look, it wasn't me, pat me down, you'll see it wasn't me, and others were willing to do this too. And the Canadian transit rider in me thought one does not touch the transit riders. So I felt uncomfortable about this. And Isaac stepped in and said, you know what, I'll do it. And ladies were coming out and opening their purse. And people were emptying their pockets. It was all I was kind of just beside myself. And sure enough, about halfway through, one of the ladies saw a young man stash the wallet under the seat as he was getting out, and they just sort of like descended on him with their handbags and with, like, really were like, shame on you, and they just full on citizen arrested him and held on to him for the police to come. And they came and they took my statement, and I got my wallet back, and everyone apologized, and I got back on and we went home. So if this were a dinner party, I might look around and say, you know, imagine if that happened to you on the TTC, someone steals your wallet and you insist on patting everyone down, and you let me know who gets smacked. So that's story 1. Story 2 is a bit more introspective. It was kind of the itchy finger journaling I was doing while I was there. And I went back and read it recently in preparation for this, and it was sort of like a mashup between like a rapturous Bono-penned op-ed and angsty undergrad sociology paper co-authored by white guilt. It was really kind of painful. And so the one scene I want to share with you from that version of the story was about my 4th or 5th week or so, and I was likewise in one of these buses going out to a village that was down a dirt road, about an hour and a half away from a small town that I had been staying at. And the small town had one restaurant, and in that restaurant the night before, I had been chatting with a lady, and she was telling me a bit about how foreigners and white people in particular are seen in this area of Ghana. And she shared this expression, which was sort of a leftover from the colonial period, that said, if you're on your way to church and you see a white man on your way, go home because you've already seen God today. And she shared it saying like, well, you know, people don't necessarily say that and believe it at this stage, but it's kind of, there's a vestige there. It's still sort of alive. And so I was thinking about that as I'm going to do interviews as an observer of a community meeting that's being held by this organization. And it became very quickly apparent as I showed up to seats kind of arranged like this outside in the village square that I was not just an observer, I was a part of it. They had a seat for me at the front facing the audience with the other dignitaries and elders and the chief. And they introduced me, and the chief made this big speech where he said, you know, you're the first white person who has been to our village, and what a great honor that is. And I felt honored, but at the same time was sort of thinking about this expression the lady had shared, and what does it all mean? What's colonialism? And before, I think I could feel it as something that was disconnected and historical and something I could observe, but now here I was, felt very much a part of it with people who were here to watch a workshop and a presentation, watching me take my notes on the side, my angsty notes. So the third story. This is a story I don't really tell. It's kind of what I was journaling around as I was writing. It's less the what does it mean story and more the what kind of person am I story. So this one centers on an acquaintance I had named Janet. Janet was the caretaker at the little motel thing I was staying at in the town. And yeah, I had a good kind of easy rapport with Janet in a way that I often didn't feel like I could with other Ghanaians who had the sort of deference and respect that was making me uncomfortable at the time. And so Janet and I would just chat at the end of our day and shoot the shit and have those kind of easy breezy conversations that you just have with people you don't know that well. And she was also very kind as a host in the way that many Ghanaians were. She would do my laundry and not accept payment. She shooed away the giant spider that was in my room because I didn't know what to do about that. And so as I was leaving after 2 or 3 weeks there, I wanted to show that appreciation. And I figured a tip wasn't the way to do it, so I spoke to my translator actually. And he said, okay, well, if you make it a gift and put it in a note and maybe address it to the whole staff, that would be fine. That would be a nice gesture. And I did that. And then I went to a kraal where I was staying for the next little leg of my journey. And that night, quite late at night, I think it was 9 p.m., my phone just started kind of like blowing up with calls 5, 6 an hour. And that continued kind of all through the night, and eventually it was a number I didn't recognize, so I just turned it off. And the next morning I woke up and turned it on again and was sort of like getting my things ready to go out and do more policy fellow-y things. I don't know, something that seemed really important. And it rang again. And I picked it up this time and it was Janet. She was kind of breathlessly thanking me over and over. It was so kind of you to leave that gift. It was wonderful to have you. I can see you're a good person. And then there was a pause and she said, but I have a problem. And I could hear her voice kind of cracked when she said the word problem, but I was feeling busy. So I told her I'd call her back. And sure enough, I was trying over the coming days and weeks. I would try and call her, and either she would answer and say it's not a good time, or I wouldn't reach her, or I was just doing my busy policy fellow things. And eventually I did reach her. She called late at night, another night, and she described to me how who I thought was her family was actually not. She had come being promised an education, and when she arrived, she was just put to work and was working long hours, and didn't have anywhere else to go, and just felt stuck and was saying, I don't know what to do, can you help me? And I didn't know what to do. And I didn't really know how to respond, but I knew my translator was from the same town, so I said, okay, let me call him, he's a teacher, I'm sure I can get him to come on by, and that might lead to something. And I did, and I spoke to him, but I didn't really follow up. I didn't allow that to be at the front of my mind as I was doing my other urgent things, until the very end when I chatted with him, and he said, oh, you know what, yeah, I went once or twice and I didn't find her, so I didn't really know what to do, and that was it. And I didn't call her back either, and that was sort of the end of that story. But I still feel, I can feel the sort of crack in her voice in my gut still 6 years later. So there's this one other scene from the first story though. This is the hijinks story again. And for this one, it was my last week, and I had been doing all this work, and I decided, you know what, I've earned a bit of a little vacation. So I want to cross Lake Volta, which is the big, largest in the world, man-made lake right in the middle of Ghana. So I decided I'll go across it on a ferry that I'm told exists, and I'll see what's over on that other side. So I get to the beach one morning, I was dropped off. I see there's other people coming out of the buses, but I don't see like a loading dock or anything, but I say, okay, I'm sure that's fine. And then what shows up is this, it's like a wooden canoe, like a very large canoe, sits 4 people across with an outboard motor at the back, but not as I understood, ferry material. So anyway, we load on, there's about 50 or 60 of us, and of course I get welcomed at the front with the old ladies as I was used to. And I had my camera with me, and I was always really reluctant to take pictures, because, I don't know, people might think I'm a tourist. I felt weird about that. But the one picture I did take was of this cage at the base of the boat next to my feet. And it had a little yellow bird in it. It looked sort of like a canary, and it was something that one of the ladies was carrying. And as we got out into the lake, the waves started sort of hitting against the bottom of the boat. And it was shaking the cage a little bit, and the bird didn't like that. And then as we got further, the wind was quite strong, and it was hitting. And I noticed that some of the cotton that's between the boards of the wood was first starting to seep water, and then the waves were actually slapping through. And it got to the point where it was accumulating a little bit around our feet. Got to the point where the men then started at the back, bailing it out with water. And as it's hitting, each time, it's shaking the bird's cage a little more. And now the bird's doing the like wavy, freaky arms thing. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. But the ladies next to me seemed quite calm, so I think, okay, well, I'll just ride it out. And by the time we get to the middle, I am like looking at the shores and looking at the wind and the waves and thinking, okay, which way do I swim? If this thing goes down, it's accumulating. And the bird is still freaking out, and it's still making the loud Tweety, freaked out bird arms. And eventually it sort of just keels over. Like it's like so freaked out that I guess it died. And this felt like the canary in the mine shaft and was not the imagery I was looking for. But eventually we get over to the other side, and it, I guess, was fine. People seemed to go about their day, and that wasn't too much of a concern of them. And when the lady grabbed the bird to go, it actually did spring to life. I guess it was just scared. But I tell this second scene of the first story because it loops back in my mind to the third one. The third one isn't one I necessarily like. I don't like how I feel about it. But it doesn't have a clean resolution even. It sort of just has a feeling for me. It's the feeling I get in sort of the quiet moments after I tell those other stories, when I still hear Janet, in a sense. And so in those moments, I feel breathless and whipped around, sort of like a little yellow bird in the bottom of a half-sinking boat, thrashing around inside a little piddly wooden cage of its own creation.